You see your name?
Right. Did see my name. Looks very cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave, and I'm here with Greg. Greg, what's up?
Hello, Dave. As you know,
What the
I
contrast
had
here?
a wild party yesterday,
It's a
a
banger.
children's party, because we're old, and had a huge water slide in my backyard.
Is it true that
Mm.
you took all the kids away from their parents and took them to the back corner of your backyard and read them fairy tales?
That's right. I'm the Pied Piper of kids. I know where you're going with this. Yes, but I read them fables.
Wait, where am I going with this?
Oh, I thought you were because you thought I'm a big grim guy, but I'm also like what we're talking about today is also like a very moral development centric episode.
Did any of the
Children.
parents find it weird that you insisted on taking their children away from them and wouldn't
They
tell
found
them
it
where you were
weird that I
going?
dressed in a
A leotard.
toga
In a leotard.
and I was like, gather around, kiddies. We're gonna do some fables. Just like my
Oh,
my old friend Aesop.
you called them
And you
kitties.
get upset, Dave, because sometimes I don't bring up the what are we gonna talk about today? Today we are going to talk about Aesop and his legendary fables.
Do you know where people can not only hear about Aesop, but they can also see us talking about Aesop?
Patreon.
On Patreon,
Hmm.
which we also always forget to mention at the beginning of the episode. So we're going to just
And
make a quick
you'll
little
miss out
plug.
on this. Oh, there it goes. Well,
And I just missed out on it again,
yeah,
apparently.
there's a beautiful copy of Aesop's Fables that I have here that's just been honestly getting back into this stuff. Like, you know, it's important because it's not like we're like teaching anybody anything new here, but I think it's going to be fun for people to listen in on a conversation of us talking about, how we forget this stuff, these
Yeah,
little
for
like
sure.
lessons that are so important.
Greg, I totally made a mistake. I was supposed to have something with me right now for this episode, and I forgot it. So I'm going to have to get back into the real game and make a reel of it. So when I was in elementary school, we um we wrote our own Aesop fables. So I have me and like a friend wrote an Aesop fable, and we made like the whole class like made a book. Everybody was paired up, and we made a book
No
of Aesop
way.
fables. So I have an Aesop fable that me and I can't remember who I wrote it with made something about
Yeah. If you
a
were to
wolf
make
in
an
sheep's
Aesop
clothing.
fable now, what do you think that you would want the moral to be? That's a hard question.
I think if I remember correctly, and I'm probably totally wrong, it was something about a wolf in sheep's clothing, but somehow it backfires. I forget what it was, but it's probably something about authenticity and being authentic to yourself. And I think it would kind of still could do something like that.
Okay. So you'd go with wolf in sheep's clothing too, because obviously Aesop dipped a toe in that
Yeah,
first.
yeah, it's all right.
Okay.
I'd put my own spin on it.
I want to talk for a minute about Aesop because and not we're not going to get into a huge biography on the guy here
Thank God.
because it was 2000 years ago, thank God, right? But you know, it's his whole story is about overcoming adversity and he was born with physical disfigurements. So this guy's like kind of
It's six fingers and
yeah,
11 toes.
it's a weird guy to start,
Nah, just
right?
kidding. I don't know that. What kind of
But
disfigurements did he have?
well, he was unable to speak
Ooh,
for a long time. And then people started to notice he did have this like very specific wit and intelligence, but was very specific to like creating little fables and stories. And it makes me think like, all right, so what was going on with him? It sounds like maybe he had autism.
hmm.
And like he had like this delayed sort of development in some ways, but in other ways it was like
Wait,
really hyper focused.
but what were the physical disfigurements?
I don't
Do you
know. I
know?
didn't really get too much into that.
Oh, I wish I knew.
I
You know,
know.
it'd be
Well,
the
we can get
craziest tie-in ever if we found out he was actually Elephant Man.
yeah. He's the original Elephant Man. Yeah. Aesop the Elephant Man. So the like he do you know he was a slave too?
No.
So he was a slave for a while.
What
Uh,
nationality is he?
well, he's Greek.
He was a Greek slave.
Well, there's all kinds of like, back then it wasn't so much it was more like spoils of war kind of thing, right?
Oh,
Even like debt, all kinds of ways to become a slave back in the day.
I'm going to take this one and he's going to write me fables. That's what his
And yes,
master
he
said.
did.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. And
He was
and
really good
probably
at
Dave,
it.
if you can think about it, like from if he went from slave to, kind of well-known storyteller, he probably saw every kind of humanity, what's important, what's not, how people should be treated and how they
Hmm.
shouldn't. But what I think is the most important kind of aspect about Aesop and the brilliance of it, and the reason why we're still talking about it 2,000 years later is because the animals that are used in the fable, right?
Yeah.
So it's like they are able to like convey these complex sort of lessons and social commentary in a way that's engaging but like less confrontational and less judgy because parables are like like Jesus did that, lots of people like lots of stuff in like Indian culture, lots of parables, Chinese culture, all of it, right? And it's using human characters which kind of I don't know, can do to me it feels a little judgy. To me it can be like, well, why is this, why am I better than this guy? What does this guy look like? It takes away from sort of um I don't know, this simpler, easy to digest, less confrontational approach. What do
Yeah.
you think about that?
So, I mean, I think that's kind of the purpose. Yeah. And I think that makes a lot of sense. When you're reading about it as animals, you don't directly connect to the animal. Like, hey, that wolf represents me, right?
Hmm.
It's like you're just reading a story about this humanized wolf. I think
Exactly.
you make the connections as the story goes, right? Because you see the characteristics or who they're supposed to represent, but it doesn't still, it's still, there's enough of a gap there that you're able to kind of see that this is like a caricature or this is like a representation of a type.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's kind of the point here is it's obviously it's representing societal views and issues. It's representing human characteristics and flaws and values and all that stuff. And but it's not a direct commentary like this person is you, right?
Yes.
So I think it's easier to digest, right?
Absolutely.
Um so I guess some examples of that, if you were to look at some of the animals, like we got like the fox, right? What is a fox known for?
Sneaky, sneaky.
Yeah, they're sharp, right? Sly
Yeah.
as a
Smart, right?
fox. Yep. So, I mean, and that would just represent a person that's got those characteristics. I guess the thing that makes it less offensive is if you're in denial, you're not going to be like, hey, that's me, right? But if you're aware of your own stuff, you're going to be like, oh, that's kind of me. And this is something I can maybe take away from that stuff, from this story,
Absolutely.
right? Um, yeah. So it doesn't directly criticize a person. Uh, so a lot of the animals they come with their own like meanings and associations. So like we said, the fox is sneaky, greedy, sly. No, the wolf would be greedy, right? Not the
Kind
fox.
of. Yeah. 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 Wolf would be, I guess, greedy or like just dangerous.
Dangerous. A rabbit or a hare would be is like fast, right? Which can be to their benefit or their detriment.
That's right.
A tortoise is more intentional, wise, I guess, in some
Mhm.
way, or just not pressured or rushed. They're going to be more thorough. So it's like you take these characteristics and you kind of work with those, right?
But I
Um,
also like how what you're talking about there, where it's like there's these animals and they'll have these like characteristics and things that there's these traits, obviously. And I think in people, it's important to recognize like you might be intentional like the tortoise, and someone else might be like fast paced or sly or cunning like the fox. But like one isn't better than the other. It's like there's the appropriate role for each person. I think that comes across in these things too. Like
yeah,
know who you are and know your strengths kind of thing.
and that's
And
kind
be
of what
careful of
I
your weaknesses.
right. I think that's really what these stories highlight is like know your strengths and know your weaknesses and be mindful of those things and how they can be a benefit or how they can be a detriment to you in your future and all your goals that you're pursuing. Because if you're only thinking of your strengths, right? You're missing all the other stuff that the other. It's always like one animal is one thing and the other is like its counterpart, right?
Right, right.
So like the obvious the whole package would be somewhere in the middle, which is kind of what we want to strive for versus being one extreme or the other. Because like while the other animal might be the one that comes out, I don't know that we always want to be the slowest thing in the world, right? Or
No,
the most
but
scared thing or whatever.
what what's interesting, what's coming up in my mind is like we have this even in the animal kingdom for sure, and then we do it with our own sort of, I don't know what you would call a species, I guess, where we create this hierarchy of like these traits, this is us, this is what we're good at, and like it almost becomes like one is better than the other. Like, and I
Oh
don't
yeah.
that's a strange thing that we do, and it's a dangerous thing that we do because we do it with human beings too.
Greg, I as you just said that, I just thought of something that we often do is we often glorify things that could be considered negative characteristics.
Hmm.
So something like being cunning, in some ways, we glorify that, right? If a
We do.
person's like, but I mean, ultimately, like being manipulative, yeah, it can get your needs met. It's a skill that we all need to have to some extent because, manipulative doesn't have to be a negative thing.
Doesn't.
We do have to understand how to obtain the things that we need in life. So being cunning is a way of getting that. And a lot of times in like the business world, and I'm sure even back, when this was written, it was like probably considered to be somewhat of a good thing if you were cunning, if you were sly, if you were greedy, you were, preserving yourself and making sure
Hmm.
you were there was probably a lot of emphasis on these negative characteristics. And I think Aesop was trying to show these are not things that we need to be glorifying. There's a lot of benefit to these polar opposite characteristics, and in some ways they might actually be the smarter way,
Yep.
the long term smarter way, versus like that it's like that hedonic pleasure versus
Hmm.
that long lasting happiness that we talk about. A lot of these characteristics almost fit into that hedonic pleasure
Yeah,
group.
as I was like reading through these, I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, holy geez, like, boy, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Like, all these little lessons are so, like, they would be so much more useful than like jumping on social media if if someone just perused, because it's almost like they're obvious, but at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, like where just by reading is like, where in my life am I kind of like in need of this lesson, you
Right.
know?
Instead of jumping on TikTok to get a TikTok therapist, it could be reading
Yeah.
Aesop's Fables. But if you are on
Or
TikTok
an
and you want a
AI
TikTok,
therapist, which I hear people talking about.
yeah. But if you are on TikTok, you want to hear a TikTok therapist. Greg's been dropping some jewels on our TikTok, so make sure you get on there
Yeah, yeah,
and also
please.
read the Fables.
It can be good.
No, I mean, but it's risky because when the way people seek out information today is often like so much of it comes off as opinion based,
Hmm.
like versus these stories which are more like played out for you so you can see a start and a finish and you can kind of see how these characteristics play out and the dynamics with them, even if it's in as animals carrying them out versus like a human telling you like this is what's right, this is the thing that you should be doing with your life, right?
Right.
It's not telling you anything. The stories are not telling you anything.
Yeah, it's
They're
separate, which is
guys.
cool. Like
Yes,
it's
they are.
separate from our lives, where it's like we're observing. It's almost like your thoughts, where you kind of have like a better approach on them if you can like separate them and observe them versus sort of be all tangled up in it. Because if
Yeah,
it's human beings, it's kind of like that.
I mean, I think that is like, even with Grimm's and, all the other kind of fairy tales. I guess that's what the greatest thing about all these things are is like they're not telling you anything. You make your meaning out of it, you get your own takeaways, and everybody's takeaway could be a little different, could be a little
Mhm.
uh, connected to some a little bit more than others, all that stuff. Um, and then the biggest thing is like they avoid offending anybody by
Yeah.
making it these characters who you cannot completely like say like that it's not a full representation of me. And it's also, I noticed, based on like characteristics that are more intrinsic in people, or like what would be the word, I maybe that's not the best way to describe it.
No, it
It's
is.
not.
It is. 'Cause I was thinking the same thing. It's almost like you can use animals as like parts of every subconscious or even like archetypes almost
Yeah,
in
and
each
it's not
person.
like physical characteristics. It's not like
No.
taking things that we can't change either. They're all things that we could potentially work on, right? I can work on my greediness where I can't work on my, my skin color or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like, so it's not taking attack at a person for things that they don't have control over. It's showing, the dangers of certain characteristics that we may, you know, embody.
I also like talking about like avoiding offense in a sense too, because like think about how useful using animals would be or has been. Like if you think of like George Orwell, you think of like 1984. It's like you're critiquing a system of government, but since you're using animals, it's like, what's going on? Like, can I be mad about this? Like, can we shut this down? We can't
Right.
really because
Right.
it's like separate somehow. So I think like simplifying like complex ideas is an important piece of this too, and like using the animals make lessons maybe more accessible, especially to children. And I think that's something that we've kind of gotten away from in society. But think about how cool it is, or like Peppa Pig and SpongeBob, and kids really connect to this like magical thinking and learning through you know I don't know, animals and things that
Yeah.
don't really look like them. It just like really kind
But
of helps their
we
moral
associate
development. What's that?
we associate certain things with animals too, which is helpful for kids. And they can use that. And for some reason that just feels easier for them to associate those whatever it is that they know about that animal with a person or
Yes.
however and relate to it in a way. I don't totally understand the science around that, but it's true. It is. I'll never forget. I had a patient who had the hardest time talking to me about things that were going on in the home, and then I bought these like little animal figures, and then as soon as I brought them out, he gave each one a family member's name, and he
Huh.
started to reenact like stuff that was
Man.
his feelings. Basically, like he had one family member out on an island because he was upset with them, and the other family members were close to him, and he would sometimes like start to attack them a little bit. And but he like the lion was his dad, and like the elephants, I had two elephants, and they were his mom and sister, and they're kind of, I don't know. I
I
associate
know where you're gonna go.
all positive feelings with elephants. I don't know.
Okay.
I love
All right.
elephants. So
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something completely different.
no,
I thought
I
you were
wasn't
gonna
gonna
say
say
like there were big,
no,
bigger
not at
people.
all. Not at all.
Mom's an elephant. Okay, moving right along. You know what I mean? All right.
But
So
yeah,
yeah, no,
I think it's
exactly. And
helpful.
and they add this layer of charm. Obviously kids are going to connect. They see adults all the time, but you don't see animals talking. But you kind of like when you look at them, it's fun to imagine them talking and giving them human-like qualities. What's that? Like anthropomorphism, like
Yeah.
you making giving them human-like qualities. In fact, scientists, I heard this on a podcast a while back. When studying animals, they try to completely take all like you have this tendency to kind of anthropomorphize, like even when you're studying, trying to be objective with things, and like, well, why would they do that? Maybe they're like emotions or
Yeah.
something like
No, you
that.
have to go clean slate with them, I would assume.
They figured out that's what the science was like. They were like, you have to go clean slate. You can't like put human emotions or emotions on them at all. But they found when they did that, they were less accurate with their behavior, which
Really?
is so interesting.
Huh.
And I don't know what that's supposed to mean. I'm not a scientist. Um,
You're
I
not?
guess we can't, but like not a good one if I am one, you know? But it's just, and then like I talked about before, the last like I think the most like this, it's like this allegory that fables are allowed to do, where it's like you can critique people, you can critique government, you can critique like vices, all without sort of coming down on any particular group of people, and you get your point across pretty effectively, I think, because
Yeah.
everyone knows what you're talking about, but but it's not like clear. So it's just this brilliant idea that has just stuck, I guess.
Yeah.
You know?
So, Greg, let's break into a few of these Aesops,
Oh yeah, Dave, because you
these
want to know what?
these fables.
There's nothing better than what Aesop is good at is like even at the end of all his stories, he hits you with and the moral of the story is. I mean, not
Yeah.
in those words, but like he gives you the moral, which
Yeah.
is great.
Can
Because
I
you
can
don't
I
want
see
to be,
the copy of the book you got?
I know it's hard to see because
Lift it up. Okay. I almost bought a copy yesterday. Um, but I didn't. And I wish I did because it was kind of a
Yeah,
cool
dude, it's
copy. It was
cool.
an
It
older one.
really is. What do you want me to go first? I'll go first
Sure.
because this one kind of stuck out to me. The ants and the grasshopper. So, right? A grasshopper that had merrily sung all summer long was almost perishing with hunger in the winter. So she went to some ants that lived nearby and asked them to lend her a little of their food they had stored. Quote, "You shall certainly be paid for this time of year, when this time of year comes again," she said. "What do you do all the summer?" they asked. "Why, all the day long and all the night long I sang, if you please," answered the grasshopper. "Oh, you sang, did you?" said the ants. "Well, now you can dance too." As if to say you can get lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is great. So the moral of the story is don't neglect the future in times of plenty, for tomorrow you may need what you wasted today. So I think that this idea of instant gratification and like putting in the work today and it'll benefit tomorrow is like a lesson that is timeless. I think of it, often say to my kids, like, the discipline of getting up in the morning and maybe like working out or something is freedom later on in life. Like I can run up and down this slide with you today because I get up and I work out and I've kept taking care of myself. But maybe there's some people my age who would crumble down. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like I'm able to do these things because I choose my suffering. So it's like the ants are choosing their suffering and then they're like enjoying and so it's like this power that you get from and the ability to choose your suffering. And the grasshopper doesn't get to choose his suffering. He just suffers. So there's more power in choosing it than and just happening to you, I think.
I believe that to be true.
Yeah, I do too. So, hey, Aesop, not bad. Not a bad start.
Not a bad start. All right, I'm gonna pick one. I wasn't gonna read the story, but now that you read a story, I feel like I'll read one.
Dude, on the spot, not the best reader, but like we'll work through.
All right.
We can read.
So, the frogs who wished for a king.
Okay.
So, was this one on your list?
No.
All right, good. The frogs were tired of governing themselves. They had so much freedom that it had spoiled them, and they did nothing but sit around croaking in a bored manner and wishing for a government that could entertain them, with pomp and display of royalty, and rule them in a way that to make them know they are being ruled. No milk and water government for them, they declared. So they sent a petition to Jupiter asking for a king. Jupiter saw what simple and foolish creatures they were, but to keep them quiet and make them think they had a king, he threw down a huge log, which fell into the water with a great splash. The frogs hid themselves among the reeds and grasses, thinking the new king to be some fearful giant. But they soon discovered how tame and peaceable King Log was. In a short time, the younger frogs were using him for a diving platform, while older frogs made him a meeting place where they complained loudly to Jupiter about the government. To teach the frogs a lesson, the ruler of the gods now sent a crane to be king of Frogland. The crane proved to be a very different sort of king from old King Log. He gobbled up the poor frogs right and left, and they soon saw what fools they had been. In mournful croaks, and they begged Jupiter to take away the cruel tyrant before they should all be destroyed. How now, cried Jupiter, are you not yet content? You have what you asked for, and so you have only yourselves to blame for your misfortunes. The moral: be sure you can better your condition before you seek to change it.
I like that moral.
I like that moral. That story kind of stood out to me. I'm sure it kind of got lost because of my reading, but um, yeah. So many times we sit around and we don't appreciate what our current like surrounding is, and we think something's going to change it. This is like actually the reason why I just wanted to say that one was because I work with a lot of people who will constantly complain about their, especially at my other group, the group home job. People in group homes, they always want to like go to a different group home. They always think there's going to be like this magical move that's going to make them happy. And, I've had people actually progress to like nicer, less restrictive environments, and they still aren't happy. And this is, for me, this is kind of like almost like an analogy for all of us. I think we all do this to an extent, but I see it like so, visibly there, because they literally come up and they're like, I gotta move, I hate this place, I hate this, my roommate, I hate this, all that. Um and they never just look around and say like, well, I've already moved like 5 times
Hmm.
and none of these moves have ever made me happy, despite me always saying I'm going to be happy. So at some point, how do I start to look at myself and say like, well, what do I contribute to this situation, or how could I improve this myself? So these frogs were thinking that there was going to be some magical change that was going to make them happy, and they were going to was going to provide them with something. Little did they think like, hey, maybe we can make this a better environment for all of us. We
Hmm.
don't
Also,
need
like,
some outside source.
yeah, like, and the idea that like everywhere you go, there you are.
Yeah,
So it's like, if I change this, like if I change this job or if I change this, I also like kind of like what something that I took from that is if you are going to change a job or if you are going to like make a big change, make sure you're prepared. I like that portion of it too, because it's like this grass isn't always greener idea, but it's with the caveat that like if I'm going to switch jobs, my father told me this always, if you before you leave a job, have another job.
yeah,
That sounds so obvious, but like I see, and then there is this like wisdom too that people say you have to be desperate to sort of succeed. Like you have to be put, like you have to be made to survive to be able to survive, or like, like if you lost everything, like you would have to kind of like get, maybe change everything. But I don't know if I love that. I think like I like the safe approach. I like the make sure you have something ready before you jump ship on something
yeah.
else.
Before you leave one of your 3 jobs, make sure you have a fourth job so you can land back on your 3 jobs.
Yeah, land on your feet. You know what I mean? All right. Okay, so this is one that we all kind of have heard of. And I don't know, is the wolf in sheep's clothing on your list?
Nope,
Okay, because I know that you've done your own rendition of
I
it.
have. I
Okay,
have.
so let's see what Aesop did, and then maybe on later in the week we can get a reel from Dave and see how he compares with, with the 2,000 year legacy of Aesop.
That's right.
So, the wolf in sheep's clothing. A wolf, wrapping himself in the skin of a sheep, was able to sneak into a sheepfold where he devoured several young lambs. The shepherd, however, soon discovered him and killed him and hung him on a tree, still in his disguise. So other shepherds passing by that way thought it was a sheep hanging there and cried to their friend, "Is that the way you treat sheep in this part of the country?" "No, friends," he cried, swinging the carcass around so that they might see what it was. "But it is the way we treat wolves, even if they are dressed in sheep's clothing." So the moral, says Aesop, is a person's nature will reveal itself despite disguise. And I think that is true. I
Yeah.
think that is such a deep meaning where it's like, I mean, a wolf in sheep's clothing. When you think of that, it's like someone's infiltrating, like someone dangerous is infiltrating somewhere where people are vulnerable,
Yeah.
and that's probably a great lesson and something to be careful. But I think the deeper lesson is, yeah, like in relationships, it's making me think like how many times people will show you who they are, believe them, right? In a lot of
Yeah.
ways, like.
Yeah, I think it's such a silly thing for people to not at least hear when you've heard a number of people tell you a similar thing about a person, and then you're like, no, well, everybody deserves a chance, and
Mhm.
I'm gonna find out for myself. Like, sure, that's great to give people chances, but also don't totally disregard if it's, a consistent thing that you're hearing. I do believe people can change. I do believe that people can
Mhm.
grow, but what also you have to not be naive, right? There's a line that you have to be able to
Absolutely.
like see and say like, all right, well, I should probably at least consider these things. Another version of this I can see is like, so I like it with like friends. It doesn't even have to be in like a romantic relationship. Like someone who comes off as very like social, very, easy to talk to, like for the party, and then like turns out to not be a good friend. And you've seen that pattern 1,000 times, but they always land with like they always turn out getting new friends because they're very likable, right?
Mhm.
But the underlying thing is they don't have the capacity, or there's something about their personality that causes them to not be a great friend. Like I've seen that happen before. But you kind of look at that person, you're like, oh, how do these other people not see it? What, like, because I've experienced what they've done to me or something like that.
Hmm.
So I think that that's kind of like a version of this too. Sometimes people can like hide those qualities about them by being like, you know, pleasant, knowing how to like interact with people really well, but deep down inside, like they just don't have the capacity to have like a reciprocal relationship with people because maybe they're too self-centered, or they're just really scared of getting too close to people, so they push them away. So there's a lot of ways that like I think people can be a wolf in sheep's clothing. It doesn't always
And
have
it's
to be harmful, but it can be hurtful.
and it's this real like perversion of sheeps are supposed to be this docile creature, and you're around what you expect. Like it's the violation of expectation. It's also the ultimate biblical and the most dangerous thing out there is deception, right?
Yeah. And
Like,
also sheep are simple.
sheep are simple.
So like you don't look too far into sheep. Like they just do what they do.
Mhm.
They chew on grass and get
They
shade.
they kind of chill. And
They're
there's this great book called Sapiens, and it kind of talks about this idea, like, how we've changed as a species, and sheep, at one point were aggressive, and through, like, almost de-evolution, they've become like these docile creatures because, through, I guess, like punishment and, you know, the way they're treated, right? They're
yeah.
domesticated, I guess. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know, there's like just going through these, there's so much interesting stuff that comes up. But hit us with another one, Dave.
All right. I'll read one last one. I don't want to read
Okay.
anymore.
Okay. Read one last one.
I don't like reading. Uh it makes me self-conscious. All right. The Fox and the Hedgehog. All right. A fox swimming across a river was barely able to reach the bank, where he lay bruised and exhausted from his struggle with the swift current. Soon a swarm of blood-sucking flies settled on him, but he lay quietly, still too weak to run away from them. A hedgehog happened by and said, "Let me drive the flies away," he kindly said. "No, no," exclaimed the fox. "Do not disturb them. They have taken all they can hold. If you drive them away, another greedy swarm will come and take the little blood I have left. The moral is better to bear a lesser evil than to risk a greater in removing it." That's
Hmm.
an interesting storyline there, because not a whole lot happens.
Yeah, not a whole
Actually,
lot
it's
happens. That's kind of the beauty of these too, by the way.
yeah, this is actually like the absence of things happening. It's kind
Yeah.
of like don't do anything. So he
So,
lets these flies, these blood fucking sucking flies, settle on him. They make him weak, but he tolerates them because of, if he removes them, what could happen if he, you know, it's just going to happen again.
so this is almost like a, a lesson that maybe we can kind of critique, because it's like it seems like stay in a bad relationship.
A little, yeah, it does seem like
You know,
that.
right? And it's also like if your government is oppressing you, just deal, because like
You don't know what's going to come
the
next.
next one might be worse. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this
there
is
there
this is one
this
of
is a
those.
little problematic, but also, I mean, I think there's a story to tell
Mhm.
here, but yeah, the this specific message feels a little problematic.
Yeah, like nothing's well, I think like the different messages, nothing's ever going to be perfect. There's going to be some, you know, like with every if you pick a new career, or if you pick, a new partner, there's going to be issues, and are these issues, you know, um what will you deal with? Right?
Yeah, yeah. I
You know,
mean, because I think sometimes people, especially relationships, and maybe even work,
you're gonna have to take a
they're
little
you're
shit.
you got to. You can't expect that you're never gonna get the blood sucked out of you, right?
Yeah.
And you can't run away from every single thing. There is always going to be a little negative in any situation as you get like accustomed to it. The other thing is like, you know, this could just be Aesop, slave Aesop, saying like, maybe
dude,
I'll tolerate this master because who knows
slave
what the
stop.
next one could be. Like, I'm sure this probably has some personal connection for him because he
Hmm.
probably has heard stories of people being like, "Oh, I need a new master," and then he's like,
Yes.
and then they go and it's like significantly worse. So
Yeah.
I'm sure that this story probably has more, um, you know, connection to a time where there's like significant danger and not
Right, right, right.
in
So
moving.
Aesop has some of himself in this one, and it's like, well, we don't know about that, Aesop,
But
but we'll work with you.
I do like the connection we're making though, like taking it to modern times. Like I do think that people jump ship really easy sometimes, and it's like this is like, hey, consider that first. It's kind of back to that whole thing of like, don't just think this change is going to make you happy. What can you have to like think about how to make yourself happy? So like there's a level of acceptance you have to have in situations, and then there's also an understanding that like, you know, there's no situation that's exactly perfect. You got to kind of think about what you're able to tolerate and is this the situation for you?
Yeah. I'm gonna read one that's like maybe a little controversial too, and then we can kind of just maybe talk about how we felt about these and wrap this thing
Yeah.
up. But I think this I read this one and I just wrote down a little note here and it says controversial, and I think I know why I wrote that, but we'll see. So this is called the vain jackdaw, and a jackdaw is a kind of bird, in case we needed a visual for that. So it's a
Okay.
bird. So a jackdaw once dressed himself in feathers that had fallen from some peacocks and strutted about the company of these birds, trying to pass himself off as one of them. They soon found him out and pulled their feathers from him so roughly and battered him so badly that when he tried to rejoin the other jackdaws, they, in their turn, would have nothing to do with him and drove him from their society. Now, all right, so let's his moral is be content with what nature made you or run the risk of earning contempt by trying to be what you're not. So, okay, I got to tread lightly here because
Yeah.
I just recently like read this article, and this can happen, and sometimes this happens and sometimes that's the fault of like, therapists, doctors, whatever. But and I think that transgender is something that happens, and that's something that like we all have to, we all believe and we all accept and everything like that. But then there is some danger there with like I just read about this girl who very young started to transition, right? And it was like a very harmful experience later on in life. And then when she's like, oh, I wanted to like kind of like go back to um, I was, she was actually autistic, which was really sad, and people kind of let her down. Because we all feel that way sometimes. Where like there's a part of us missing, and we're not sure who we are, and now there's like this like option, another option. There's always options. But in her case, it was very dangerous, and you know, made the transition, did all these things, and now wanting to go back, and it's like that's not really an option now either, which is kind of like sad. So I don't know, Dave. I know we sometimes like don't like to get into the more controversial subject, and we don't have to. But I'm just, and you can like maybe you're reading this a different way, but try to fit in with somewhere you're not. It could be anything. But what did you take anything from that?
Yeah. Well, kind of just to your point, it's an interesting thing because, there's so many arguments that can be made, so many cases that can be made. But one of the things that, as you were saying, it kind of sticks out to me is like we do. So when things are permanent,
Hmm.
we typically put like an age where you can consider it, right?
Yeah.
Because that allows us to understand that like your brain's developed enough where
Hmm.
you're making, the choices you're making are very rational, or hopefully they're more rational than when you're young. And also, this is something you're going to have to live with. So make sure you're completely content on your decision here. We do it with tattoos, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But we don't always do it or always have the same view of it for different things. And I understand it's because it's different. It's like, living in an identity that doesn't feel, uh, doesn't connect for you. It's not congruent for you. That's totally different than getting a tattoo. I totally understand that. but it is just something that like maybe we have to figure out the ways. And we don't know full stories too, because there are, I from the processes that I understand and the people that I've worked with, I do know there is a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of people having conversations. So I'm assuming, but I also don't know that it's the same for every case.
Yeah.
There should be always, though. There should
Oh, a lot.
always
Yeah.
be challenge, support. And I say challenge because that's like something, Greg, I'm sure that you're getting a lot of that from that in like that interpersonal group we do, where it's like you can't just support everything that someone says.
Hmm.
You have to provide challenge. And that's where first of all, that's the best way to connect with people is to actually support and challenge. Provide both. Don't just be one sided with everything. If you only challenge people, you're annoying. If you only support people, you're just a cheerleader. If
Hmm.
you support and challenge, you're actually helping them make better choices for themselves because they're seeing other sides, they're challenging themselves, hopefully, and they're actually coming up with strong arguments to why they are making the decisions they're making. I feel like that has to be something that's done for people. So, like, when they're trying to fit into anything, not even just with that one topic, but like with anything, challenge yourself. Like, if it feels like you're not being authentic to yourself, why are you doing
Authenticity is the word I was waiting to pop out. And
yeah,
that's
why
like,
are you doing this? Why is it meaningful for you to move forward in this direction? Is it because you need community, because you lack community? Is it because there's something in you that is like feeling lonely? Or does this really connect with you? Are you really feeling like this is something I strongly believe in? And
and
then the other
also
part you
in
have,
life and in my own life, I've
yeah,
found that, there might be things about yourself that you don't like and that seem really like maladaptive when you're young. And like, I sometimes like I would watch a movie and, there would be the bad guy and everyone would be like, yeah, I'm glad he's like dead. I'm glad he's hurt. And I'd be like, well, yeah, but like, you know what I mean? Like, want to know like why, like why he is the way he is. And like sometimes maybe that's just like a very light example, but there's things about us as people who are like, oh my God, this thing about me, I don't like this thing about me. This thing sucks about me. But then you get older and you wait it out, and then all of a sudden, like that thing that you thought was crap about you ends up to be like one of the most useful things about you.
yeah.
And you just need to kind of like live to allow that to happen sometimes.
The other thing people cannot wrap their head around at a young age is how often you change as a
Mm-hmm.
human and you don't always like the same things that you liked at one point in your life. Your whole interest inventory can change, but for the most part there might be a few things that really strongly stay with you or connect with you, but like we change so much. So instead of trying to find ways to fit in, just be yourself and
Mm-hmm.
do the things that feel authentic to who you are at that time.
And your
If
people
you're
will show
gonna
up.
and if you're gonna make a forever change, make sure it's really thought out because you might feel totally different about whatever that forever change is 10, 15, 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because if there's anything that's true, I mean, is there anything that we can like depend on for sure? Is that things change and we
that's it.
change. And when someone's like, when I have someone tell me like, I just don't know who the hell I am, I'm like, well, you're further ahead than a lot of people
Right.
because
You're thinking about it.
yeah, yeah, like we can't know exactly who we are because in a year from now, it's gonna be different, and a year, prior. It was different. Like we're different. We're constantly kind of evolving, just changing. We have experiences. Things change us. Things
And
make us, hopefully, right?
we're not just who we are on the surface. We are
No.
more of who we are is like those characteristics about us, those values that we hold, the things that we feel strongly about, the our our viewpoints of life and things like that. We're more that than we are like our clothing style
Hmm.
or haircut or whatever. Like those are ways that we express ourselves, but that's not who we are. And we're different in every place we go. So
We are. We are different. Yep. So that's a good way to end that one. And look, I encourage people to kind of like dive back into these because it's fun. They're very digestible. They're short. And I mean, if you have kids, if you don't have kids, still useful, right? It makes you
yeah,
think. Like you can
for
kind
sure.
of like get deeper into these are really simple morals, but you can kind of get really kind of like, what else could this mean? Like, where else is this applicable? And then if you have kids, it's a beautiful way to kind of teach moral lessons that, it's starting to look like we need more in society, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
For sure.
that's where we're at with Aesop. Thanks, Aesop.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. As we mentioned earlier, make sure you join the Patreon. It's growing and growing, and we'll get more and more on there. Um, but if you're listening, make sure you leave a rating and review. We would love that, and we hope that you just keep listening. So thank you for the support over the years we've been doing this, and yeah, we appreciate the new people who reach out as well as the long-term listeners who continue to reach out and offer suggestions or just make comments and things like that. We appreciate everybody, so thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Have a good one.